I very unhelpfully grabbed my bulletin and not my sermon, so had to backtrack. Anyway, take heart, friends, for the end of the world is near. The gospel appointed for today is from Luke chapter 21, which comes near the end of Luke's gospel as Jesus is preparing the disciples for his death. Soon he would be betrayed and given into the hands of the authorities and be crucified. The Messiah, the one coming into the world, the holder of power of life itself, of the power of life itself, would soon be killed. But before those events took place, Jesus wanted to make sure his disciples and his other followers were clear-eyed about what they were getting into following him. They were following him to the end of the world. In this passage, Jesus overhears someone admiring the beauty of the Jerusalem temple, how beautiful its stones and its ornaments. And ever the life of the party, Jesus predicts that the Jerusalem temple, the very center of religious, political, economic, and social life for the Jewish people, would soon be destroyed, with not one stone left upon another. All will be thrown down, he says. Jesus had been telling and showing the disciples that yes, indeed, he was and is the Messiah of Israel, the one coming into the world from God to save and redeem and restore. So why was he talking about the destruction of the temple? Isn't that precisely the kind of thing a Messiah is meant to prevent? Of course, Jesus had tried to tell his disciples in every which way he could that his kingship was not of this world. And while it was true that God's people, Israel, were suffering under Roman occupation, he wouldn't be the kind of Messiah who would lead a violent insurrection against the empire and become an earthly king. No, Jesus' redemption, the liberation that he offered, was and is deeper than that. It is grace and love enough to free Israelites and Romans from sin, death, and evil. And let me just say, too, that Luke warns us about false messiahs. And we can be sure that when people of power promise us easy answers and peace through oppression, we are dealing with a false messiah. Things were not going to get better for Jesus' disciples, not temporally, not right away. They were, in fact, going to get worse. In the year 70 AD, the world ended for many Jewish people, at least the world as they knew it. The Jerusalem temple was utterly destroyed and desecrated by Rome after a failed rebellion. Its stones were scattered and its beautiful appointments given to the glory of God were taken to Rome as spoils of war. It's difficult for most of us, myself included, to imagine that kind of disruption. It's the kind of disruption that calls everything into question. An apocalypse, if you will. Apocalypses have gotten a bad rap over the years, though. And please don't get me wrong, apocalypses are often uncomfortable, but an apocalypse, at least in terms of biblical literature, is not about predicting the end of time or reading tea leaves or making speculations about just how bad the world has to get before God does something about it. No, the word apocalypse means an unveiling, a revelation of the truth, a moment when the curtain between the divine, transcendent, and the earthly, immanent is pulled back, and we get to see a vision of that which is true, really true, from a divine perspective. One of the truths that Jesus reveals here is that the world is broken. that human relationships individually and between groups of people are far too often characterized by violence and competition over resources that we think are scarce. And that results in wars and insurrections and nations rising against nations. There are natural disasters, some caused by natural phenomena, others caused or worsened by human action. Jesus is describing the way things are. He is not prescribing this sort of thing as God's desire or will for human creatures and for creation. We see this brokenness in sharp relief when we measure it against the kind of vision that the prophet Isaiah gives to us, a vision of the reign of God, a kingdom in which God delights in God's people with joy, a kingdom where the sound of weeping, where the cry of distress is heard no more, a kingdom where babies and old people alike live out their full life, a kingdom where labor is not in vain, but where all can enjoy the fruits of their labor, a kingdom where those who work to build houses can live in them, and those who harvest food can feast from the fruit of that harvest, the kind of kingdom where wolves and lambs feed together and lions eat straw like oxen. A kingdom where people will not hurt or destroy each other. This is the will of God for us, for all people, for creation itself. When we look at our world through Luke's apocalyptic lens and hold it up next to Isaiah's vision, we see that indeed we have a long way to go, just like Jesus' earliest followers. And I don't know about you, but this past year has felt particularly apocalyptic. Things that we took for granted, stabilities that we took for stable, have been revealed to be rather fragile. And grief, untimely grief, has come to far too many of our homes. Many of our worlds, as we have known them, have come to an end. We are caught in the messy middle between Christ has risen and Christ will come again. So what then do we do? What is the good news here? St. Luke says that we are to endure, to wait for the day of the Lord, the day when that vision of Isaiah's will be fully and finally manifest. We wait with patience and endurance, which honestly doesn't sound like very much fun at all. It reminds me of my very brief and unsuccessful stint on the high school cross-country team when I attempted to endure long distances running in North Carolina humidity. We had these shirts that said, "Pain is temporary, but a championship is forever." But I didn't find that terribly motivating. But the good news is more than a t-shirt, is that we endure knowing that God will give us exactly what we need to meet whatever lies before us. God will give us the words to say when we are called to give an account of the hope that is within us, a hope that doesn't seem to make sense given what sometimes happens in our lives and in our world. And we'll need those divinely inspired words because following Jesus will often run us afoul of those who would rather guard power and wealth for their own sakes at the expense of others. And God will give us courage when we are called to do the hard thing that is the right thing. God will give us joy in each other's company as we make the journey together. And God will give us a testimony the story of how God has moved in your life and mine, the story of the ways that God has brought us through hard times before, the deep knowledge that God goes with us, dwells with us, loves us. I know that for some of you, this might feel like wishful thinking, this talk of testimony and hope. Maybe you're so deep in the valley that darkness feels like your only companion. But you are not alone. God is with you. And in Jesus, God has walked through that valley and will bring you through it. That's also why we need each other. We need each other to bear witness to each other's pain, and when the time is right, to remind each other of the hope that is within us, to share our testimony, if you will, of how God has been faithful through the years. We get through the valley together. We get through our apocalypses together. We must encourage each other because the end of the world is near. But the word end has more than one meaning. Sometimes it does mean the final part of something, but other times end means the goal, the telos, the purpose, the outcome to which we strive, the horizon which animates the journey toward it. And I would like to suggest to you that Jesus is the end of the world. Life with Jesus is the goal, and Jesus is the means by which we reach him. Each and every week at this altar, Jesus gives us himself, his very life, so that he might live in us and we in him, full of his grace, full of his courage, full of his love. Each and every time we partake of this bread and drink this cup, we join with each other and are united with him. Our soul finds home and rest at last. We receive a foretaste of heaven, of glory divine, as that old hymn says. We taste the end of the world. So yes, we have to endure hardship and calamity on this earth. Most of the time that doesn't make very much sense at all in this in-between time. Living is not easy, and living faithfully is definitely not easy. But we serve a good shepherd who has not left us alone, but who goes before us into each unknown and through every valley. And Jesus has given us each other, fellow sheep, who show each other how to follow that good shepherd when we forget, sometimes even helping us put one hoof in front of the other. Know that today, God has given us all that we need. God has given you all that you need to endure to the end with courage, with hope, and with joy. Because we serve a God who delights in us, who calls each of us by name, and who will bring us through to the end. Life forever with God and the community of all the saints we love. Amen.